Hello, everyone. First than anything, I want to thank the Multimedia Anthropology Lab for organizing this amazing conference and exhibition. It has been really stimulating. So knowing that the time is short and Rafael is very strict with the time, I will begin with my presentation, which focuses on the use of artistic simulated sensory immersion to explore alterity in the face of environmental disasters. I will describe and discuss the piece of art that I'm currently working, which is titled Perspectivism, or the 1960 earthquake from the Panku. It consists of an immersive installation that, using Viveiros de Castro perspectival anthropology as framework for ontological appreciation, theoretical background, and methodological premise, intends to translate Lafkenche's stories about the earthquake of 1960 from the perspective of the Pancho Rock. This artwork originates from an ethnographic study I conducted during 2014 on how members from the Lake Budi Lafkenche indigenous communities remember the 1960 earthquake. The Lafkenche people are a subgroup of the Mapuche, the most populous indigenous group in Chile. I work with communities from Lake Budi, which is an indigenous protected area in the coast of the Pacific Ocean in the Araucanía region in Chile. This area is inhabited by several communities, each associated with a specific sector around the lake. In the Piedra Alta sector, which means tall rock in Spanish, is the Panku, a 10-meter tall rock situated in the sea at approximately 60 meters from the shore, in front of a guillatun ceremonial field. Guillatun is the most important ritual among the Mapuche. The Lafkenche experienced this rock as the force of a bull, the animal, with agency over storms and earthquakes, and which was particularly affected by the earthquake of 1960. This is the Panku Rock, as you can see in the picture. This earthquake is considered the largest earthquake recorded in modern history, with an intensity of 9.5. Its epicenter was in the Pacific Ocean, 80 kilometers from the Chilean coast. More than 9,000 people died or disappeared, and many coastal cities were destroyed by the quake and the tsunami that followed. One of the most affected areas was Lake Budi, where Lafkenche communities have lived for centuries. Although there have been many writings and representations about this earthquake, very few have engaged with the indigenous perspective of this phenomenon. To discuss the Panku's perspective through immersive artwork, I will firstly present the work content by describing the Lafkenche's experience of the earthquake and the Panku from an ontological framework. Then I will discuss the medium of engagement with this context, examining how artistic simulated sensory immersion can be used to explore and transmit otherwise disastrous experience. Finally, I will present the installation that I'm working. In the study, we found that the Lafkenche of Lake Budi remembered the 1960 earthquake in a particular way. The results suggested they remember it through connections between sacred oral stories, reserves of traditional ecological knowledge, and its adaptation to shifting landscape, all which became devices for memory, sense-making, and reaction toward disasters and their aftermath. However, for the production of my current artwork, I decided to approach these results from an ontological framework characterized by a focus on ontologies. Rather than questioning their knowledge on the earthquake as a singular reality, we can ask about what kind of beings come to exist within this particular context of disruption, and what socio-natural worlds are enacted through the concrete practices that those assumptions foster. By making use of this framework, we can comprehend how Lafkenche stories about the earthquake reveal a particular ontology. Here, the concept of perspectivism proposed by Viveiros de Castro can facilitate the path through the Lafkenche-world. As the author defines it, perspectivism is a set of ideas and practices among American indigenous societies where the universe is experienced as people by different types of subjective agencies, human as well as non-human, each endowed with the same generic type of soul, that is, the same set of cognitive and volitional capacities. In these societies, non-human are assumed not as other species belonging to nature, but they are invested with a specific subjective perspective. Further, perspectivism is a source for metaphysics, from where multinaturalism contrasts the multiculturalism that we are used to, which may permeate our own assumptions of reality towards a recognition of multiple natures. This applies also to natural disasters and what come to exist in otherwise ends of the world, as Danowski and Viveiros de Castro suggest. I approach this proceeding as a radical way to decolonize earthquakes. From this frame, I understand a form of perspectivism among the Lafkenche. For the Lafkenche, the force associated to personhood, newen, is distributed along multi-species and things. In this sense, culture is not only human, but attributed to nature. Moreover, all entities come into being in relation to one another, as the newen is distributed through language and ritual practices. The Panku rock condenses 5 aspects of this ontology that are stressed by the occurrence of the 1960 earthquake. First, it is a rock, yet also attributed with the force of a ball with agency over the weather and earthquakes. Before 1960, whenever the rock emitted the sound of a ball blowing, the sky will cover. Likewise, the Panku was also experienced as a ball that, when getting loose and confronted by the ball from the volcanoes of the mountain range, will make the ground shake. As you can see, we have a lot of volcanoes in the mountain range. Here we can distinct a second aspect of the earthquake within the Lafkenche-world. The Panku highlights the association between earthquakes and volcanoes, which is common among Mapuches. This in turn links to their assumptions of relationships between entities that can confront each other within a frame of world balance. The Panku also reflects the effects of the rituals have on the Lafkenche world. Originally, the ceremony of Guillatun in Piedra Alta was centered on the Panku. The Panku functioned as the altar for the ceremony, as the Machi, who is the main spiritual leader among the Mapuche, will guide the ceremony from the top of the rock, while the rest of the ceremonial group will dance around it. Moreover, the Panku is one of the 2 central figures to pray to in the ceremony, and the practicing community identify themselves in relation to the rock. This ritual, the Guillatun, is also part of the Mapuche's cosmogonic myth about the Tren Tren, which is directly related to Lafkenche's experience of earthquakes and tsunamis. Tren Trens are hills that rise when the sea level increases. There, the Mapuche were saved during a catastrophe from a mythical past. However, it's through rituals that these entities not only come into being, but also how some of their properties are actualized. As the Panku's behavior, the Tren Tren rising depends on the performance of Guillatun, which also happened in 1960 in Lake Budi. People all around the lake climbed the various Tren Tren and performed Guillatunes for months. There are stories of some Tren Tren rising and changing in consequence, which reduced the number of deaths in the place. Another aspect of the Lafkenche experience of the earthquake is the way shifting places became memory devices or witnesses. After the earthquake, the sea covered the base of the Panku rock, as you can see in the picture. As a consequence, the ball no longer below it, and the ceremony could no longer take place on the rock. Nevertheless, when faced with such changes, new stories emphasized the Panku's ability to cause earthquakes, and the Lafkenche adapted the cliffs facing the rock as their new Guillatun field. Thus, the Panku became a device for remembering the earthquake as a mythical confrontation, and its agency was actualized through the Guillatunes they continue performing in the place. Finally, the stories and expectations surrounding the Panku is, as an agent of coming disaster, evidences a circular perception of time. Not only the earthquake of 1960 was expected to happen every 100 years and announced to Machis through dreams, but the permanence of the figure of the bull rock is a constant menace of a disaster expected to repeat itself again and again. To engage with the Lafkenche's ontology of the earthquake, artistic multimedia may be useful to translate between worlds and then explore and transmit the Lafkenche's earthquake. Within the perspectival framework, anthropologists are proposed as translational agents. Here, translation is an operation of differentiation where there is an explicit understanding that the translator and the native are never talking about the same thing, as their use of an homonymous term, for example, earthquake, came from different ontologies. Translation makes this misunderstanding explicit while producing a third analytical position from what alterity may elicit on the translator practice. We can exercise this kind of translation with art. art can be conceived as a medium for receptivity of a collective and for expression through materials that allow the production of new material realities. In here, the new analytical position allowed by the translation may be embodied in a new material world from where to engage with ethnographic material. I propose that among artistic media, immersive installations are particularly optimal to this task. Immersive explicitly elicit a world inside a world. To accomplish this, immersion is both the action of immersing someone in a medium and a deep mental involvement in something. As immersing, it can be configured as a perspectival experience of a double spatial condition, an outside and an inside, and the transit between them. As involvement, it is also about guiding attention, which can be achieved with the production of scenic performances. Following this frame, as I say at the beginning, the immersive installation I'm developing intends to translate the Lafkenche-world from the Panku's perspective when facing the disruption of the 1960 earthquake. The idea is to explore what kind of world may be elicited from the encounter between the earthquake ontologies of the Lafkenche and my own and other artists I call for the production of this piece. This translation, in my opinion, will facilitate both the exploration of the Lafkenche world, but also its encounters with the audience of the artwork. As a translation, this artwork becomes a pseudo-Lafkenche world from where the earthquake can be experienced otherwise. Now I will end by describing the form elicited by this proceeding. In terms of the dual definition of immersion, the installation will have its own spatial and scenic dimensions. From the outside spatial perspective, there will be an enclosed world within a pseudo-dome inside a room where the landscape of the Panku will be projected onto its surface. The structure will be isolated at ground level by volcanic sediments and elevated with a base mirroring the floor, making the structure look as if floating in air, as the action often trends. People will transit from the outside to the inside through a narrow entrance, as if entering through a crevice in a rock. It will be from there that the Panku's perspective may be assumed. This is some frames of the video, 360 degrees video. As you can see, this is the landscape of the Panku, and downstairs is the volcanic eruption that I will be commenting now. Once inside,
you've got 3 minutes, my friend.
Yeah, I'm ending. Once inside, immersion will be achieved by creating an integrated sensory simulation. The installation mixes a habitable infrastructure with 360-degree rear projection video, mechanical movement systems, and immersive audio, together with interview extracts to produce a lively perception of the pseudo-Lafkenche earthquake. Perception in here is the integration of all senses in one experience, and it is collective. And it's through this perception that landscapes are produced as still recognized. This will contrast habitable installations with other forms of immersive devices as head-mounted VR, since these other media are limited to one or two senses and individual experiences, whereas installations may create an enveloping environment capable of being experienced as a lively landscape by a collective. To guide attention, the scene in Perspectivism will follow the Lafkenche stories about the earthquake, while taking the Panku as the main point of view. The scene will present, on the one hand, the sequence of events in the stories. This is announcement of humans and animals, first earth movement, quietness, earthquake, desperation of an end of the world, call for ceremonies, guillotine, sea waves rising, and a volcanic eruption. On the other hand, it will incarnate the concept resulting from the attention on the Panku, the agency of things, the relationship between earthquakes and volcanoes, the effects of the guillotines on the world, and the circularity of time. Specifically, and with this I will end, the scene will last 23 minutes. Sitting inside the structure, the audience will see and listen to the landscape of Lake Budi and the Panku Rock in the sea all around. After some minutes so the audience can accommodate, an extract of an interview summoning the Panku's agency will be played. Then they will hear sound of scandalized animals and another interview extract announcing what is about to come. The sound of the shake will follow, with wavy movements on the surface of the structure that will distort the rear projection. The ground level will change, slowly producing slopes. Human crying and despair will end the earth movements, followed by the call of the kul-kul, the Mapuche horn, and the beginning of the sound of the guillotine rituals spinning in space. Then the tsunami sounds, and the ritual will intensify while modifying its source toward the superior speakers, remaining over the sound of the waves, imitating the rise of the tren. Simultaneously, the image of the landscape will go upward, as if floating in the air. The ritual will continue until the sound of the volcanic eruption exploding, while the exterior projection changes to volcanic smoke, as you can see here. A vertical beam of light between mirrors will appear inside, simulating an eternal vertical fire. The scene will end with an interview extract indicating that the world has been left hanging, and the whole image will darken. There will be a sound of being left hanging in the void. When the scene ends, it will restart automatically, returning everything to the beginning in circularity. That will be all. That is the final image of the installation in a hypothetical museum. You can experience some of the work in progress in the exhibition. It's a 3D model with 360-degree videos and immersive audio. Here are the credits for all the work of the piece. And
That's
thanks
fantastic.
and thanks to the National Funds of Cultural Arts and Development of Chile, ASIGDEM, for funding the artwork. Thank you, Rafael. Thank you, everyone, for.